The classical school models the economy with the assumption that markets are always at equilibrium. The market for loanable funds finds the interest rate, which balances savings with investment. At the equilibrium interest rate, all savings becomes investment spending, and all that isn't saved is either spent on consumption or by the government from what it collects in taxes. This market for loanable funds is the critical market which keeps the circular flow of income flowing. Then there is the labor market, which finds the wage, which balances the supply of labor with the demand for labor. At the equilibrium wage, all those who want a job can get one, and those who do not wish to work for the market wage turn to whatever alternatives afford them that option. When this market is at equilibrium, there is no involuntary unemployment. The amount of investment replaces the capital that is lost to depreciation until we reach a steady state that also sets our level of output, or real GDP, based on the economy's production function, or its technological capacity. In other words, left to their own devices, people will drive resources to the most efficient uses desired by society by following the incentives of consumer demand and the opportunity for profits. Adam Smith's invisible hand at work. The amount any society can produce, which determines our standard of living, depends on the resources and technology we have. And the classical model assumes that people are making the best use of those resources and technology already. And so our aggregate supply of goods and services does not depend at all on the price level. The price level doesn't come into this process at all, which means it translates to our graph with the price level and real GDP on each axis like this. Long-run aggregate supply, or LRAS as we will call it, is a vertical line because in the classical model it was based on, there is no relationship between the price level and the amount of real GDP the economy produces. The price level can be high and it will produce the same output as when the price level is low. And due to Say's law of markets, this will be the most efficient level of output. You can think of it like an arrow pointing at the horizontal axis saying, here, this is the amount of real GDP the economy can sustainably produce with the resources and technology we have. It doesn't matter what numbers we write on our dollar bills. We can count them in the hundreds or in the millions. How much we can produce doesn't change just because we print off some more green pieces of paper. And since this level of output represents the efficient level of production, an economy that is not underproducing and leaving people unemployed, and an economy that is not overproducing and burning through resources too quickly, LRAS is like the flag on the golf course marking the hole. This is the outcome we should be aiming for, whether or not the markets self-correct fast enough to get us there. This makes long-run aggregate supply synonymous with full employment, where there are enough jobs available for everyone who wants a job, and with what we call potential GDP, or the level of GDP we will get when the economy is operating efficiently. When we add aggregate demand, we're able to find the long-run equilibrium for the economy. Remember, aggregate demand represents the total amount of spending in the economy. If the economy produces at the level of long-run aggregate supply, then the point where these two lines cross is where the economy is at, setting the price level. For example, if we spend $20 total, if that's our aggregate demand, and the economy produces and sells 5 things, that's our long-run aggregate supply, then we know the average price of those 5 things, the price level, must be $4 for us to get $20 of total spending. When all prices and wages are able to fully adjust and markets immediately reach their equilibrium, then production will remain where it is set by long-run aggregate supply. If there is an increase in aggregate demand as a result of some extra money being printed or additional government spending or for any other reason, then the equilibrium just moves up along LRAS, pushing up the price level but leaving real GDP the same. The result is inflation, but since production stays steady, there's no change in unemployment or output. If aggregate demand decreases, say because a bank run has reduced the amount of credit and the money supply shrinks, then just the opposite happens. We get deflation, but output stays the same, so no recession occurs. Since this is based on the classical model, it is no surprise that long-run aggregate supply suggests money neutrality, that changes in the money supply do not lead to changes in real GDP. But remember, this observation does not seem to match reality. This is why the neoclassical synthesis refers to this as long-run aggregate supply. If prices and wages do not fully adjust, if they are sticky and get stuck in place, then deviations away from long-run aggregate supply are possible. The theory now is that given enough time, eventually those prices and wages will adjust in the long run. We might not always be on LRAS, but the economy will always be headed there. Just like the classical school, long-run aggregate supply is not useful in understanding why recessions occur or how to get out of them, but it does offer us a target to aim for. The target can move, though, and for good reasons. Long-run aggregate supply shows the capacity of our economy given the resources and technology we have. But the quantity of resources we have and the productive power of our technology can change. If there is an increase in the quantity of resources available to us, such as an increase in the labor supply or an increase in the capital stock, or perhaps even just the discovery of a new resource like plastics or solar energy, or if there's an improvement in the productivity of our technology, such as new and better machines, increased human capital, or smarter production processes, then long-run aggregate supply will shift to the right. Notice that the result is economic growth, and this should not be surprising. We saw how long-run aggregate supply is built by the same mechanics as the Solow model of economic growth, and that model would agree with this insight. But we have learned something new here. Economic growth, when paired with the same amount of total spending, results in deflation. The price level goes down. Since in many ways deflation was the great villain of the Great Depression, this is an important finding and is why modern economists are in strong agreement that the money supply should be managed so that it grows along with the economy. That is, if we have a growing economy, we should always be printing more money to keep the price level steady. Of course, sometimes there are setbacks in our economy. Natural disasters can destroy resources, and some technologies, Facebook, might actually reduce our productivity. In those cases, LRAS shifts to the left, resulting in a decline in output and an increase in the price level. This combination is very painful for an economy. Declining output means a lower standard of living, which is combined with inflation that raises prices and makes it harder for people to afford what they need. Avoid if at all possible.